Hello everyone, this is Derek, or Lycan101, and this video is going to be another shout out for megamonstercookies. He asked for another video, so here it is, about generating towns and how I deal with that. So his question was three-part or four-part, depending on how you want to break it up, and I'm going to try to answer each of these in as much detail as I can for him, since he asked for this video specifically. His first question is, how do you make towns or cities for your heroes? Well, to answer it simply, if I really want to go in depth and really flesh out a single town, for example, if this town is going to be a center point or take up 3, 4, 8 sessions and really needs to be fleshed out, if this is where they're going to be staying, I will typically follow this piece of paper here. There's a couple pieces right here, just two sheets. These originally came from Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, when I believe it came with the DM screen. So way back, you can find it, I'm sure, probably online somewhere. It just says, I'll try to get this on the camera, generating towns. So what this does is it breaks everything down into quite a lot of detail for you. It has town sizes ranging from hamlets to metropolises, including populations, what that means for each one. For example, a hamlet can have 81 to 400 people, whereas a metropolis is over 25,000 people. And it also goes into detail about the gold limit that a store would have, or the town or city in general would be able to provide a person with. So like a metropolis has 100,000 gold pieces, whereas a hamlet only has 100. It breaks it down, keeps going into smaller and smaller detail. We have power centers for the community. We have community wealth and population. We have alignment and power centers. We have community authorities, NPCs, highest level locals, community modifiers, racial demographics, and it even goes so far as to really make you think about every aspect that you want your community to have. And what's good about these tables is that each table is a rollable chart out of a D100 scale, so, or a percentile if you don't have a D100. So what this really does is it allows you to create towns, cities, metropolises that are as diverse as you want them to be, or as the tables allow you to make them. So, for example, I don't have any dice with me right now. This is just a quick video, but I'll just choose something at random. Let's say small town. Okay, I'm making a small town, which means 901 to 2,000 people with an 800 gold piece limit. I've already got right off the bat. Okay, small town. Let's say, make this nice and easy, 1,000 people. 1,000 people, that's a lot of people if you think about it. What are these 1,000 people going to do? Who is the authoritative figure for these people? There's a chart for that. Let's keep going. So, power centers. We have conventional, non-standard, and magical. So conventional would be a community has a traditional form of government, a mayor, a town council, noble ruling over the surrounding area under a greater liege, a noble ruling community as a city-state. Then you have non-standard. The community may have a mayor or town center, but the real power lies in other hands. It may be a guild, a formal organization of merchants, craftsmen, professional thieves, assassins, or warriors. Wealth, aristocracy, in the form of one or more rich individuals. Magic, a form of a powerful temple full of priests to a single sorcerer cloistered in a tower. Or monstrous. Consider the impact on a community of a dragon who occasionally makes non-refusable demands and must be consulted in major decisions, or a nearby ogre tribe that must be paid a monthly tribute. Right off the bat, you are fully creating this town that goes into more and more layers. You're setting up the power level of control, who's in authoritative control. They have details about how many guards you should have as a full-time security staff for the town or village, whatever level it is, based on the population. It goes into so much detail. This 2 pieces of paper are indispensable for really having enough time to create towns and cities well in advance. This would be weeks before a game, or a few days, maybe months if you're planning a whole bunch of cities that you want your characters and your players to go through. But Mega Monster Cookies followed up with a second question: how could you do all of this on the fly? And that's a really great question. Like I was just saying, you can't have this sheet of paper out every time and going, okay guys, so you've rolled into the next town. It's a quick dice roll. It's a large town that okay, and okay, another dice roll. Non-standard kind of government. But no, it's just not going to work. I'm afraid for behind the screen. Characters are going to be sitting there going, okay, what are we going to do while he describes this town to us? It's not what you want to have happen. So what I like to do on the fly is, if I want my characters to be going through different towns of varying sizes, is I like to think about how, take for example medieval times, a lot of mapping was lost, a lot of cities were just kind of cloistered into the woods somewhere. Each one had a small name, correct? But that doesn't mean that the traveling people who went out and about knew the names of every town. So if you want to have a small little hamlet just crop up as your characters are adventuring, just keep a list next to you behind the screen, or out in view if you don't have a screen or if you don't plan to use one, just of random town names. Just give a little blurb. Maybe it's a hamlet, it's got 200 people. It only has its local authority figure is an aging sheriff. He was in a war, he's got a lame leg or something. Just some little basic things. Don't go into detail, just have a nice little list of, I don't know, 4 or 5 different towns or villages of varying sizes and complexity. And then what that really does is it allows you to have just enough ready for any eventuality or any circumstance that your players might throw your way, while giving a little smoke and mirrors that you have everything planned out. You don't necessarily have to have it all planned out. Just have those little blurbs. I'd recommend 4 or 5 just ready to go, and if you do wind up using one after the session, write it all down. Maybe this is what happened here, this is who's here, these are the NPCs I made on the fly that are important in this town, and then store that somewhere in case your PCs come back to it. And then add a new name to the list of your town. This saves you so much time and really helps your characters feel like the world you're playing in is alive, because you have a name for a town, you know a little bit about its people, and they've gone through and then they've moved on. Memorable, but at the same time forgettable for them, which is good, because they don't want to have to remember everything. So if you've got just enough to make them remember it for that long enough to make it feel real and then move on, that's the key to town creation. This next question is, how do you recommend shops and kings and queens within your cities? So let's start with the easy one. Shops. Now, shops are important in every aspect of a person's life. Think about any kind of shop or small town in the United States or Europe or wherever you might be. Think about that small community. What do they have to survive? Let's go through it. We can leave it modern day for right now. You need general store for basic goods and supplies. You have to have, speaking in modern times, we're cutting out Walmart and superstores like that. We're thinking about smaller places. You've got the general store, like I said, followed up by a place for food. So you have to have some kind of grocer. That can be broken down into bakeries, etc., for different types of food. But let's keep it broad scale for now. So we've got the general store, we've got some kind of grocer. Then we move on, you've got entertainment of some sort. That can be anything ranging from a musician's store where they sell drums or guitars. Just something to distract you. So that would also maybe include some kind of electronics store. And then it branches out into the other kind of survival needs. So that, just thinking about it like that, as what people generally need. So including in that would be like some kind of housing repair service or something of that nature. And then what we've just done is we've created it already just by viewing Modern Times is a whole community for Dungeons and Dragons. Each one of those communities that you're creating needs to meet those same kind of requirements. So let's think about it. Let's keep going with that small town that I used just as a quick thing on the fly. So this small town, what is it going to have? Well, it's going to have some kind of farm somewhere that provide people with food. There's going to have to be a butcher who's providing meat to survive on. There's probably a stream nearby, so there's water. Does that mean that there's a mill, maybe, so that we can get wheat and bread? And then there's a baker. And then from that, is this a heavy horse-driven society? Then there would be stables. Then there would have to be an armorer or a blacksmith, because he would have to be making horseshoes and steel plows. So thinking about the basic necessities that a person needs to survive on in a town is what actually makes the town. These individuals with all these different skills come together and form this community because they need one another. So what I like to do is try to meet each one of these needs for a community. You don't have to get specific with all of them. You just can say, oh, well, there you've passed the mill, where you know that the town probably has all of its wheat stores to turn into bread, or something of that nature. If you want to give it a personal touch and make it memorable, and this is going to be a town that your characters use over and over again, I would suggest giving shops names. It makes it memorable, just as you would give a tavern a name. So what I like to do is use a very good resource is the Elder Scrolls series, the Morrowind, Oblivion, all of those games. If you really think about it and you look at the game, each town, each city has these shops, and each one has a name. By providing these names, you remember it. Your players remember, oh, do you remember that time when we were at the Dancing Stallion Tavern? Those were some good times back at that tavern. Or, you know, Horse's Hammer for an armor, or the Magic Shop, Extraordinary Things. You know, something like that. Just use what's available. I always go to Elder Scrolls if I need some kind of quick name on the fly. And I keep a list of those with me behind the screen as well. So you can kind of see I'm building up a kind of a plethora of things behind the screen. But what that really does is it helps me keep in order. So if some player does something on the fly, okay, you guys went to this new town, it's this and this, it's got this kind of ruler. As you walk through the gates, they might not know anything about it, but oh, you see a sign overhead, it's got a stallion reared up on the sign, and it says, engraved on the sign is the Dancing Stallion. And then they're like, oh, that's the tavern, let's go in there. And then they go in the tavern, and then I can go into a little bit more detail about that, and then have the rest of the town prepared in my mind. So we've got Dancing Stallion, we've got Horse's Hammer, the Armorer, etc. So my overall tip for this question is, you know, name the shops, it's good, helps be memorable, use Elder Scrolls, use your own imagination, and we're going to answer the second part of your question, kings and queens within the city. Now, kings and queens are a little more difficult to handle, I'm afraid. Kings and queens require some kind of lineage, some kind of family, some kind of history name, and generally, unless it's some kind of border keep kind of thing, some kind of border family, the town that they're going to live in is going to attract attention because they're a king or queen, therefore making it a larger city, and therefore a little more complicated. You're going to be getting into, as I said with the sheep, one of the larger towns, metropolises, because, let's face it, wealth attracts attention. Kings and queens are going to attract attention. Kings and queens are going to want to have tournaments and jesters and all these other forms of entertainment and showing of wealth and luxury, which is going to attract artisans, which is going to attract more people. So using kings and queens in random towns generally becomes more difficult. However, that doesn't mean you can't use them. It just requires more preparation with what I've mentioned already. So if you're going to throw in kings and queens, be careful what you do. I would suggest instead of a king or queen, maybe try a duke or a count. and then that doesn't require as much. It requires a little bit more work, but not as much as a king or queen, and you can still have the smaller towns because this count or whatever, duke or princess or whatever that it is ruling the town could be, family fallen out of grace, out of favor with the king and queen, could be poor, towns in disarray, something like that. But generally using kings and queens becomes a little bit more difficult. And now on to his final question, what about raids? What about them? They're good, they're bad, they're everything in between. Because my problem with raids, while a good combat experience really provides a snare in for the PCs to either defend the town or leave it, what you're effectively doing sometimes with a raid is destroying part of your creation. You've spent all this time creating the town and everything, so let's see what could happen with that town that we're still throwing up in the air, that little town with the dancing stallion and horse hammer and extraordinary things. Let's throw a raid in there. Your players are hanging out in the dancing stallion. A guy bursts through the door, blood splattered across his face, and say that raiders are coming. The players want to help out. They rush out to the town gates. The local militia has rallied quickly and formed at the gates. But the raiders that are coming in are vastly outnumbering the town guard. So they tear through the town, lighting buildings on fire, extraordinary things goes up in a blaze, now everything's on fire, there's magic explosions happening because of all the potions in the shop. And while, yes, a great experience, and I would recommend that if you want to devastate a town and you've had it pre-planned well in advance to have a raid go on, then go for it, by all means. Destroy the town. You've built it up, you've destroyed it, it's brilliant, and a great experience. But if you want to do it as something random, you risk ruining everything that you've created, because let's say extraordinary things gets burned in a fire, or the owner of the dancing stallion dies. What then? You have to create a new owner for the dancing stallion. You have to have people rebuild extraordinary things or put something else in there, and it creates a little bit more work on your part, and it really tests your imagination and ingenuity on the fly. So my suggestion with raids is be a little careful with them, but that doesn't mean you don't have to cut them out entirely. If you want to throw in a raid, make sure it's planned. Make sure you've got backups for people who might die, plans for rebuilding the town, if at all, and things of that nature. How is the town going to move on after the raid? That would be my suggestion. That's going to wrap up all of the questions that megamonstercookies had, and I hope this helps him and anybody else about building and generating towns and cities. If you have any questions on where to get the Generating Towns papers, let me know. I will try to find a way to get them to you. I can try to upload them in a PDF or something and see what I can do to get them to you. If anybody else has any other questions or comments, please let me know. If you want to see any other kind of video, let me know, and I will do my best to put them out. This has been Lycan 101. I wish you all happy gaming.